Afghan Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi makes a historic trip to India. India agrees to restore diplomatic relations, agreeing to open the Indian embassy in Kabul. All the while, relations between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban government seem to have hit a new low after unconfirmed reports of an attack on Kabul. Even though the Afghan Taliban government has denied this and the Pakistanis haven't spoken on it, witnesses say that Kabul was attacked and specifically a Pakistani Taliban leader was the target. What's going on? How are India and Afghanistan's relations progressing at a time when Pakistan and Afghanistan's ties are seeing new lows? To get a better understanding of this, I'm joined from Kabul by a friend of the show, Obaidullah Baheer, who is a political analyst. He's with the American University in Kabul as well. Thank you so much, Obaidullah, for joining us. Let's begin with what the Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi said in New Delhi at the Afghan embassy, and then we can move the conversation ahead.
अच्छा, आपको पता है कि 4 साल से हिंदुस्तान और अफ़गानिस्तान के ताल्लुकात रोज़ बरोज़ आस्ता आस्ता बढ़ता है। तो ये हमारा पहला सफ़र है हिंदुस्तान को, और आज ये फैसला हुआ कि हिंदुस्तान भी काबुल में अपना जो तकनीकी मिशन है वो डिप्लोमेटिक मिशन को बढ़ाता है, और दिल्ली में भी हमारा डिप्लोमेट आता है। हमारे दूर दराज इलाके हैं, वहाँ पे कुछ अटक हुआ है, हम उसकी मजम्मत करता है, और हम पाकिस्तान हुकूमत का ये काम एक बड़ा गलती समझता है, और इससे मसाइल हल नहीं हो सकता है। अफ़गानिस्तान का तारीख़ गवाह है कि ऐसे मसाइल ज़ोर से हल नहीं किया सकता है। तफाहुम और मुज़ाकरात का दरवाज़ा हमने खुला है, तफाहुम होना चाहिए, और जो मुश्किलात जिस ममालिक के अंदर है वो अपना मुश्किलात खुद हल करे।
So that was the Afghan Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi speaking in New Delhi, speaking of new ties between India and Afghanistan, and also what is happening between Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban government. Let's begin with the historic visit first, Obaidullah. What do you make of this trip by Amir Khan Muttaqi to New Delhi?
No, it's always good to talk to you, Ali. Thing is, I think there's only one country in the world that sees it as the biggest thing happening in the globe right now, and it's a visit between two countries that are in the same region, and it's an establishment of better ties, which is very normal to see around the world. Unfortunately, there's a bigger elephant in the room, and that is that Afghanistan cannot be tolerated to be non-aligned with either Pakistan and India. And it's interesting because we were having this conversation earlier in the day with a few intellectuals here in Kabul, and just the reaction to the Sindoor and the clashes that happened between Pakistan and India earlier this year. I mean, the Taliban probably gave the most balanced condemnation of the events. So they condemned Pahalgam attack and the loss of life there. They also condemned the Indian transgression into Pakistani territory. However, that was not taken as a non-aligned stance, because non-alignment cannot be tolerated from Afghanistan. So that's why we see a lot of Pakistani Twitter pundits who ended up saying that Afghanistan chose the side of India on the conflict, which is quite ridiculous when you look at the statements. It just shows you the constant imagination of Afghanistan as a fifth province of Pakistan, which sadly is fast becoming the case. The fact that Afghanistan seems to not be allowed to have relations with India is quite problematic. And considering the history that we have with Pakistan, it's asking too much.
There's so many elements to this, Obaidullah. It's difficult to pinpoint where it all started and how did it digress to such an extent. Pakistan in the past few days has suffered from attacks on its security forces. 16 security personnel from the Pakistan military were killed in an ambush in Orakzai area in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And then 11 security personnel were killed in the Tira Valley. Pakistan says that these attacks, or the people that are carrying out these attacks, are originating from Afghan territory. It holds the Pakistani Taliban responsible. What is the Afghan government's position on the Pakistan Taliban element that Pakistan and Pakistani state security forces seem to be fighting?
I mean, the Taliban's position has been pretty clear. This was a position that was communicated to Maulana Fazlur Rahman as well when he met the Emir of the Taliban. The idea is that too much is being asked of the Taliban at the current moment. Expecting them to outrightly declare animosity with the TTP or take active action against them is too premature at this stage. The Afghan Taliban would have spent time with the Taliban in Pakistan, again, all under the supervision and knowledge of the establishment in Pakistan, and then suddenly turning around and asking the Afghan Taliban to open a whole new front with an Islamist group that could very easily align with other enemies of the Taliban. That's a concern. I personally feel that the Afghan Taliban have taken quite a few extraordinary steps to help address the TTP concerns that Pakistan has had. However, there's been zero recognition, zero reciprocation for it, from the Amir declaring jihad forbidden for Afghans on Pakistani soil, directing his own fighters not to join the TTP, from them moving TTP or Pakistani refugees within Afghan territory to other provinces, to other agreements that have happened between the Taliban and the Pakistani establishment. I feel like nothing is enough, and that's the sense on this side. And again, Ali, how often did we hear the Afghan Republic complain about Afghan Taliban crossing into Afghanistan and using Pakistan as a sanctuary? And what was the classic response? It was always, oh, Durand Line is very difficult to control and monitor. And the Taliban are basically saying the exact same thing back to Pakistan, but doesn't seem to sit well when it was this very same line of argument that they used for 20 years. And again, the ultimate question is, Ali, where did the TTP come from? Did it get created in Afghanistan? Did Afghans have a hand in it? Why is it? So this is the classic war on terror narrative, right? Whenever you have anyone you're fighting against, anyone who has grievances, always label them as an outsider, always label them as the other. That way they're stripped of all human rights, all dignity, any means of political conversation, and it's scapegoatism. It's constantly looking at an internal problem and blaming an outside neighbor. And just tell me, in what rational world does the argument make sense? Let's bomb another country because we have an internal conflict. That is the exact same problem that, or thinking that the Americans took forward. But even in the United States, there were people that came out and objected to the war on terror. You know, they had a problem with invading other countries. But I've been so disappointed since last night because so many people that I thought were more rational were clapping for the bombings conducted by Pakistan. And how does that not directly lead the Taliban to turn towards India more? Because if balance is not an option, if non-alignment is never going to be enough, then obviously they're going to choose one or the other. And you're creating this fork in the road. And the first bombing in Kabul after the creation of Pakistan, so blatantly done, it's going to have consequences. And the consequences are going to start from the grassroots level of people-to-people contact and then going to have much larger security implications.
The irony is not lost. You are right that this was the narrative. And if you go back in time, how did the Pakistani Taliban come into existence? What were the elements? What role did the global war on terror play? What role did Pakistan sending its armed forces into the then Pakistan-administered tribal areas of FATA, South Waziristan, North Waziristan? What role did that have? And now the table seems to have reversed. Just to pull back a bit and focus on the bombing, or this alleged suspected bombing in Kabul, there seems to be some confusion. Some people are saying that there wasn't a bombing, that there were jets heard. A Pakistani Twitter account was saying there was a bombing. What actually happened? Can you tell our viewers on that specific night?
So last night, 3 bombings were carried out, 2 in Kabul. 3 incidents of bombings occurred. So 2 bombings in Kabul, apparently, 2 blasts were heard. And then you had the bombing in Barmal, which was in Paktika province, my home province, on a bazaar where thankfully 10 shops were martyred. And then there was apparently a bombing in Khost, but we haven't heard any mention of the Khost bombing from Taliban accounts, officially or unofficially, but we've heard about the Barmal attack, and we've seen Tulo News quote the bombing in Kabul. Now, thing is, as to like what was exactly being targeted, there was, I think, a very interesting analysis by a Pakistani analyst who asked if the Pakistani establishment had the exact whereabouts of Nur Wali Masood. Why did it not carry this out earlier? Why was it done in direct response to pressure at such time? That should be a question that should be asked on the Pakistani side. But that being said, they tried to pull an Osama bin Laden operation where the other country is caught with their pants down and they cannot justify why this person was in that country. And it didn't turn out to be true. I mean, Nur Wali released an audio right after the attack saying that he was well and within the tribal areas beneath the Durand Line, which I think was one of the reasons why Pakistan never outrightly claimed the attack, even in the press conference that you saw today. They alluded to it, they didn't claim it. And I think if they had actually gotten Nur Wali Masood, or if he was here, there would have been a whole different tone to that conference. So all in all, it was just a debacle. It was just, to be fair, we look at Israel and other countries who blatantly violate international law and violate other countries' sovereignties, and somehow all of that is bad. We look at India's bombing of Pakistan and how it was a violation. I was one of the people who came out and said that this was a violation of Pakistan's sovereignty. However, even then I reminded my Pakistani friends that this was exactly what Pakistan was doing to Afghanistan throughout the past 4 years, and they've done it again, right? How can one attack be wrong, even though the context is exactly the same, where you're saying the Indians justified their attack because, hey, we're being attacked. Where are they being orchestrated from? They're being orchestrated in Pakistan. So here's us taking things into our own hands and bombing Pakistan. And somehow we all said that was wrong, that was a violation. But when the exact same argument is applied to Afghanistan, somehow everyone is cheering. There is racist slurs being thrown around, and somehow all the sensible people become warmongers, and that's very sad to see,
It is quite sad to see, and yes, you are right that there's a duplicity or an inbuilt hypocrisy. Memory always seems to be short-term when it comes to one's own conduct. Just before these attacks and just before Amir Khan Muttaqi's visit to New Delhi, he was in Moscow, where a Moscow conference was held. Russia, Iran, and even Pakistan was in attendance. Mohammad Sadiq, the Pakistani special representative, and they all agreed to abide by or to support Afghan's territorial integrity, its sovereignty, and the Afghan Taliban government's attempts to eradicate terrorism, specifically ISIS-K or Daesh Khorasan. How important was this Moscow trip first? And it was only made possible for the Afghan Taliban delegation after an exemption was issued by the Americans, which they had been withholding since July or August, because Muttaqi was supposed to visit Pakistan in August, but the exemption was not given. It was finally given to go to Moscow and then to New Delhi. Can you shed light on this for us?
I'll start with the second part first. I have a very strong feeling that in the negotiations for the release of American prisoners that happened earlier in this month, there would have been a conversation about the limitations put on the foreign minister and his travels, and the United States would have waved that off as part of a goodwill gesture. Again, this is speculation on my part, but this is one way to make sense of it. Or it could also be the Indians reaching out to their counterparts in the United States and asking them to waive this off, using their own political leverage to have that trip happen. So there is that end to it. But on the Moscow summit, I mean, what is even the role of Omar Sadiq anymore? I really do not understand, because was he not sitting in Kabul when they bombed Afghan land right while he was still here? And this supposed conversation was a very important conversation about how to handle TTP, but somehow the establishment had a whole other idea of how to handle TTP. And then you sit and you say one thing in the Moscow summit, and then you're doing the complete opposite. So there's an incongruency between what is being said and what is being done. And that sort of makes you lose a lot of faith in diplomacy with a partner when this is constantly happening. I mean, Ali, I ask you this. When Pakistan acts as such an unreliable neighbor, what can they promise to the Afghan Taliban in return for cooperation in dealing with the TTP? When? One, there is no clear idea or vision regarding how to deal with the TTP. B, you have a history of showing that you do not stand by your word and you're saying something and doing something else. In that world, what incentive do you have as the Afghan Taliban to risk so much to appease Pakistan, when Afghanistan isn't the only neighbor Pakistan has issues with right now, so it says something, I think Jeffrey Sachs the other day said in an interview that when you have wars happening on multiple fronts, then that's not diplomacy. That means war is your strategy. And again, when you have so many conflicts that you're embroiled in, maybe it's instead of blaming one party, the original instigator should be questioned as to why that is the case. And look, I mean, the history, and here's the sad bit, right? I want your listener to realize this. You're unhappy that Afghan citizens cheer for India during a Pakistan-India cricket match, okay? This based on a context of a common Afghan seeing that Pakistan has supported anti-state elements for more than 40 years in the country. That means the very same thing that you are hurting over in the past 4 years specifically, you have done to Afghanistan for 40 years. Right? So there's a very selective sense of justice when you say this is bad, this is intolerable, but how dare the Afghan have a negative sentiment towards me? I mean, there needs to be some looking into one's own color, and then things would get better.
That is a very important point, I think, because not only are Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan or have deteriorated, if you leave India aside, but Pakistan's internal situation has also been widely affected. And you were mentioning this press conference by the Pakistan military spokesperson, which was supposed to shed light on the fight against the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or the Pakistani Taliban as they call it, but it turned into an internal rambling because the target was a political party. That political party in question is the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Its founder has been in prison, and the party has directed the provincial government in KP to lead a delegation to Afghanistan to resolve this issue. Is a political solution the only way out, or can the military option achieve anything against the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan or targeting Afghanistan, for example?
I've written about this. I've written about this for Al Jazeera as well, and it's having this very same war on terror approach to an internal problem doesn't really help. At least when the Americans were dealing with people that weren't theirs, they were dealing with people across the globe, far away from them. But when you're applying the very same thinking to your own citizens and your own people, I mean, the TTP isn't landing from the sky, right? There are Pakistani citizens at the end of the day, but somehow let's just assume in a world where there is no political conversation that can happen with the TTP. And you've seen a lot of conversations on the Twitterverse from the Pakistani intellectual elites who say, oh, there's no way we can talk to the TTP, right? But then you're not even talking to the other more peaceful elements. Where is the BYC? Where is the PTM in the grander scheme of things? You just constantly see everyone as the enemy. It's like having a grievance is a crime in itself, and that doesn't solve anything, because you're approaching everything as if you're a hammer. Everything looks like a nail to you, and all you're doing, I mean, we did this in Afghanistan, right? The Americans did this in Afghanistan, our republic, which was ultimately a proxy of American presence. They did the same thing, and they thought that the more they hit these people, the harder they hit these people, the problem was going to go away. But it doesn't go away, because it's like one of those problems where you smash something in, and I don't know if you've ever seen those villains in cartoons and movies where they multiply every time you hit them with a hammer, right? So the fact is that your constant hitting is multiplying things exponentially, into leading whole populations to feel alienated in your country. And that doesn't solve anything. Their thing is, from an outsider's perspective, when we look at Pakistan, we say, well, there is an establishment control, but at least, even if you haven't had democracy functioning for you, but at least you've had one institution that's been stable for 70 years. That in some ways actually works out as well for countries where you have some consistency of thought. Other people do it through the decent bureaucracies, but you do it through an establishment, but whatever. Now, thing is, I wish that was the case. I wish there was a larger thinking, long-term thinking from the establishment that said, here's our plan for the next 50 years. Your plans change directly with whoever's in charge of the establishment. And you're taking constant extreme turns from what General Faiza's approach was to what General Asim Munir's approach is. And that creates a huge distrust with your partners that you're supposed to work with, or with internal actors as well. So, I mean, I'm not here to discuss your country or its internal politics, but I've seen how problematic it is when you keep seeing everyone as the enemy. I mean, at some point, the Afghan Taliban were very paranoid about everyone else that wasn't Taliban as well. But they reached a realization where they're like, okay, we can't fight everyone. We need people. We need to talk to them. But when you have that approach, how many TTP can you kill? How many Pashtuns can you kill? How many Baloch can you kill? Ultimately, they will always be there. And counterinsurgency 101, like, there's no way of drying out the well. This was an American approach of winning hearts and minds, or thinking that, even winning hearts and minds had an approach where it said, let's appease a certain population so that they stop going to the insurgents. But somehow you're constantly taking actions where, how many times have you bombed different areas in KPK or in Afghanistan where the complete life loss there was of civilians, right? What happens to the family members of those civilians? Do you think they will shower you with roses next time you're there, right? You've made a whole tribe an insurgent tribe. And there is no thinking of the long-term implications of these policies, be it violations of Afghan sovereignty, or be it the approach to an internal problem that should be solved through internal, smart, well-thought-through means, instead of an all scorched earth approach.
Scorched earth approach, obviously, and as you said, not everyone can be your enemy all the time, as we see with the Afghan Taliban foreign minister's visit. He also said something about Bagram and the American return to Bagram, or as demanded by Donald Trump. Donald Trump, of course, wants Bagram back and American presence there. The Afghan foreign minister Muttaqi said that we will not allow boots on the ground to return to the country. They can come in as diplomats, as civilians, but no boots on the ground. What is the current approach, the Afghan Taliban approach? We can see they're trying to reach out, they're trying to normalize relations, but internally, inside the country, you live there. Tell our viewers, just to sum it up, the girls are still out of schools. The internet was shut down recently. Economically, it's teetering because its funds are still frozen. So what's the approach inside, and what's the situation inside, given all of this?
Let's not point fingers. I think Islamabad and Rawalpindi have cellular networks down as well. So, I mean, pot and kettle black, So,
but a lot of conspiracies are flowing around after there was internet blackout in Afghanistan. So I want you to talk about.
I mean, that was a concern. It was an oral directive given by the supreme leader of the Taliban to shut down internet and cellular networks. It obviously was a time of great panic for all of us. Ultimately, the decree was reversed. There's conversations about fiber optics connections being shut down and cellular networks being reduced to 2G. We've seen some social media apps being limited. They're choking. You cannot really access them without VPN. So lots of moving parts. But I mean, we have our fair share of problems within Afghanistan with the Taliban. But all of that aside, ultimately, Afghanistan matters to us. The Afghan people matter to us. We are regime agnostic. It doesn't matter who's ruling. Ultimately, it's our soil, our people that we need to protect. And in line of that defense, it is irrelevant how many differences we have with the rulers. We will stand by our people. That said, on the Bagram issue, I mean, honestly, I think it was just blown out of proportions. I mean, Trump is the sort of person who just says the last thing he heard in a room. And I think someone threw around the term Bagram and it became something that he was saying. And the journalists were asking him. To be fair, if you ask him where Bagram is, he probably doesn't know where it is. I mean, he didn't even know who actually built Bagram. But I mean, Zalmay Khalilzad, who's been central to the conversations with the Afghan Taliban, said he didn't know where the Bagram issue popped out from. Neither did the Taliban here know, because it was never mentioned in the conversations. So after that, it was all exaggerations about, oh, the internet shutdown was because Bagram was being handed over and so on. And the Taliban would never do something like that because it's very antithetical to their movement. Their whole 20 years of resistance becomes meaningless if they're going to allow. The Doha deal becomes redundant if they allow foreign troops, because the Doha deal's first part, third clause, I think, includes all foreign troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, which includes Bagram as well, since it's part of Afghanistan. Also, this is not 2001. The Chinese, the Russians, and as was mentioned in the Moscow summit very clearly, that they would not allow for an American base so close to their soil either. So I think it's not a matter of major concern. Trump will turn towards the next shiny thing and get distracted. So I don't think we'll have to deal with that. I mean, yeah, I mean, the United States would like bases everywhere, but I don't think the Taliban are up, or there's anything that can be offered to them in exchange for betraying their own cause.
And finally, moving forward, it's been 4 years, over 4 years since the Afghan Taliban took power. What do the next 4 years look like from where you are? And I'm sure, I know there are a lot of external factors in this: Pakistan, Russia, America, China. But inside, are you hopeful? How does it move forward?
I mean, our currency is hope, like as a university lecturer, as someone who works on the ground here, I cannot give up hope, and that's what keeps us going. I mean, the shortest path to change is reform amongst the Taliban. If the Taliban decide to mend their ways, realign their power structures where it is more horizontal rather than extremely centralized on one figure. There are enough rational actors within Kabul, within the Taliban leadership, who can make better decisions. And once major hurdles like the girls' education is removed, I think pretty quickly the international community would want to get on board and want to get involved in Afghanistan. The Taliban aren't going away, and I think that any means deployed to get rid of them is just going to open a whole Pandora box of problems that no one wants to deal with. So while they're here, attempts to reform them, intent from their part to reform themselves. But as Afghans, I mean, our job is to wake up every day and focus on the next brick that we're going to lay down, instead of letting the whole wall overwhelm us. And we're taking it one step at a time. And the thing is, the catch is, if we do it this way, it will be a more sustainable change. Every time regime changes have happened in Afghanistan, they've been through hook and crook, and ultimately it has led to very temporary changes that have only remained until the coercive force behind them remained. So for once, let's let Afghans try to build something more sustainable, prosperous Afghanistan. I always tell my friends this. I had a cousin who returned recently from Pakistan after spending 30 years of his life there. This is the first time he's moved into Afghanistan. And he said, I don't think the Afghans are really good people. I was like, why? And he'd had some trouble with some labor workers. So I had to sit him down and tell him that if any other nation had gone through 40 years of armed conflict, they would have been biting the meat off each other's arms. You know, the fact that the Afghans right now, and you've spent time here, Ali, how many times have you had shopkeepers turn to you and say, don't give me money if you don't have it, you know, mehman mabashi, be my guest. And just having that sort of humanity within us, despite our circumstances, shows that we're a very resilient people. We have goodness at our core, and we don't want bad relations with Pakistan. I mean, we cannot get rid of each other. We have such a long geography attached to each other, and it's a better world when we realize that both of us have sovereignty, and both of us need to talk to each other with mutual respect and find mutual areas of interest instead of expecting complete submission from one side or the other. And I really hope people like yourself and others who watch your show can be that bearers or flag bearers of that message that we cannot alienate our Afghan brothers, and humanity should trump everything beyond our nationalities. And we're sadly moving further away from that.
Very quickly, I know my Afghan friends don't like this, and neither do Pakistanis like this when I say that essentially these are the same people. Because my generation, I'm in my 40s now, grew up, and in fact, with Afghan or people who had migrated from Afghanistan or forced to migrate from Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation. So in places like Karachi, in places like Lahore, in Peshawar, you have entire generations of people whose parents or grandparents came from Afghanistan, who know nothing about Afghanistan, who are effectively have this idea of being Pakistanis, who grew up in places like Karachi, like Lahore, like Islamabad, like Peshawar, went to universities, schools in these places. And before we go, there's something that has been happening over the past 3 years that is a black mark on Pakistan's history, where they are deporting tens of thousands of Afghan or people whose parents or grandparents came from Afghanistan back to Afghanistan, to a country that they know nothing about. So this is something that is very important, that people who were born in Pakistan from Afghanistan or Afghan origin deserve to be Pakistani citizens, weren't given that, were in fact turned away on the pretext of, oh, you're not one of us. So this is very important, and an important point as well. And I'd like your last comment on this, the effect of deporting so many Afghans from Pakistan or Afghan origin people from Pakistan back to a country that they have no connection with.
The state-run PR point of calling Afghans namak harams, like there was some active namak and some generosity given. I mean, we've always appreciated the hospitality of Pakistan. I've talked extensively about all the ways that Pakistan was an amazing neighbor. The Pakistanis were amazing neighbors. But sadly, the state has had a whole other mind of its own in the way that it's approached Afghanistan, but also making it sound like that there was a very direct major cost of hosting the refugees, like there was no help given by the international community, like there was no way that the Pakistani state monetized the presence of Afghans, whether it was their partnership on the war on terror, the cost for transportation, everything that was taken from the Americans in return, whether it was the American and international funding coming to fight the Soviet Union. I mean, between us, I mean, do you really think that every penny that was coming through Pakistan and given to the Afghan Mujahideen was going through? So in a lot of ways, I think the balance sheet levels out, if not more on the Pakistan side, Pakistan state side. So just calling them a complete burden, like they were in a welfare state eating your welfare checks. Afghans are hardworking people. They were doing their jobs well in, and then it's not about, I mean, fair enough. You're a free, independent country. Whenever you don't want to host refugees, don't host them. But then also remember that there's a way of doing it. Like when you do it the way that you did, where it was politicized as a political tool, when you send them back with such a short notice, with so little to take back with them, you're poisoning that well. You're making sure that everyone who had such fond memories of Pakistan over the years actually eventually leaves with very bitter memories, and these people are going to turn back and teach their kids that this is exactly how the Pakistani state treated them, and people confuse the state and the people, and then we start losing to people contact, the same way like my heart broke at seeing the posts from a lot of Pakistanis yesterday celebrating the bombing of my people. You know, they're bombing my cities. You will never see me go on social media and clap for a bombing in Pakistan. You know, and that is what breaks my heart, because I saw people I genuinely respected and I thought a lot of going and clapping at bombings done in my country. You know, then what is the difference between you and any other transgressor around the world, or the Americans that bombed us, or any other transgressor in any other country? So I really hope that there's, I mean, it's too late. I think the refugees in millions have been driven out. I wrote about this as well. I said we're crying over Gaza and 1.4 million, and Pakistan is expelling even more than that. And yet no one bats an eye. So I think there should have been a conscious introspection about what this meant, and was this how you wanted to be as a people? Was this something that was normal for you? You know, how can your heart break at this happening at another part of the world, but when it's done under your own eyes, you do not object to it, you do not protest it? So I feel like I would want a lot of my brothers and sisters on the Pakistan side to really introspect, because it becomes a very ugly world when we want the other side to suffer, because we really don't want Pakistan or the Pakistanis to suffer.
On that note, Obaidullah Baheer, lecturer, American University, Kabul, political analyst, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you will return, and I can't say sorry on behalf of Pakistan or Pakistanis, but this is something that we should be, the bonds we should be proud of, and anyone who does harm to the other, we should definitely be against. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Obaidullah Baheer there. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section. Do like, subscribe, and share this content. I'll see you next time. Till then, take care.